So I thought today I would introduce you to Madame de Villeneuve, who wrote La Belle et la Bête in 1714. So if you don't know her, she is the author of La Belle et la Bête, The Beauty and the Beast. Maybe to introduce a bit Madame de Villeneuve. She started her literary career pretty late. She published her first book in 1734, so she was already pretty old. She was married at the beginning of the 18th century and was not happy in her marriage at all. A bit like Madame de Villeneuve, if you remember. I had a video I made about Madame de Villeneuve 2 years ago. You can watch it if you don't know it. I think it's interesting to see that all these fairy tale lady writers, had some similar, at least few things similar in their lives. So in that case, Madame de Villeneuve was also pretty unhappy in her marriage, and she gets separated, had her dower back given to her, and tried to make a life of her own. She was the partner of Crébillon père, Prosper Joyeux Crébillon, who was a censeur royal, which means he was controlling a bit what was published in the drama world, and also writer and playwright. He was the father of Crébillon fils, who is much more famous these days because he wrote a lot of libertine books, writings. So she was surrounded from everywhere by writers or people who evolve in the literary world. So maybe it's not a coincidence that she started to be a writer herself. She published 12 books, and La Belle et la Bête, which was included in a series of novels, a series of stories and fairy tales called La Jeune Américaine ou Les Contes Marins, sort of stories inspired by the sea world. And you know that the merchant in The Beauty and the Beast is working with ships and boats and all that. So it's interesting to know that her family, Madame de Villeneuve family, she was born in Paris, but her family came from La Rochelle. It was a big trading port for slavery also, but other sort of things. So she knew this world pretty well, the merchant world. So I suppose it gave her inspiration for the father, the Belle father. We don't know more about her, unfortunately. I wish we knew more. What also happened is she was never publishing with her own name. She was publishing with Madame de V, which means it's hard now to find sometimes the book she published because we cannot be totally sure it was hers or not. She came just a few decades after the big trend of fairy tales in France with Madame de Villeneuve and Charles Perrault, who really are the parents of fairy tale Madame de Villeneuve is really the mother of fairy tales. So it was still the trend, and Madame de Villeneuve knew Madame de Villeneuve's stories for sure. She used some similar ingredients. In the original story of La Belle et la Bête, you have some monkeys, some parrots that were very trendy because it was something coming from far from another world, and very exciting for 18th century Parisians. She also used some sort of special effects coming from an optical system in the castle, in the Beast castle, which allowed La Belle to take part to concerts, to operas, to sort of balls, not really balls, but some fairs. It's interesting, she uses this interest for science too. That was really typical of the 18th century. So the Beast Castle has this system which allows, in some specific parts with magical windows, where she could enjoy these entertainments. And I thought it's interesting because it looks very much like our computers and our internet with these windows on the wide world. And she imagined that 2-3 centuries earlier, in the same way that we enjoy that now, because La Belle couldn't speak to anyone, she could just enjoy the entertainment. I thought that was really funny. So the entertainments were l'opéra, she could go to the opera, she could go to La Comédie Italienne in Paris, so it's very, very Parisian. The original story is pretty Parisian and has a lot of references to the Parisian life of the time. La Foire Saint-Germain, which seemed was a very crazy fair with all sorts of craziness that everybody knew. Also can enjoy a walk in les Tuileries, in the Jardin des Tuileries, so all these sort of things. And the castle in the Madame de Villeneuve version is very far from the idea we have, I think mainly due to the Disney version, which really show this Beauty and the Beast castle inspired by the German castle, which is super far from the original version, which was very close in the entertainment, the architecture, all the references to orange trees, to mirrors, to Versailles really, and to the French castle, to the festivities happening in Versailles. There are a lot of that in the original story. In 1755, Madame Leprince de Beaumont published the Magasin des enfants, and she decided to do an abridged and adapted version of Madame de Villeneuve, Beauty and the Beast. So much, much shorter. She removed all the Rococo details, the description, the endless descriptions of the castle, which I adore, but she removed all that. She just decided that the beast would look less like an elephant with the trunk and more like a lion. Removed all the second part of the fairy tale, where we understand who the beauty was, the link to the fairy world, all that. So it's interesting to know that Madame de Villeneuve has added a very, very important fairy tale in the world of fairy tales, really in the galaxy, in the kingdom of fairy tales, with the Beauty and the Beast, La Belle et la Bête. She only wrote one which remained famous. Her other stories are totally forgotten. Also, there's something interesting to know that all these lady writers who mainly wrote, a lot of them wrote fairy tales, novels, are forgotten now, and it's maybe not a total coincidence, as you can imagine, that we totally know Charles Perrault's fairy tales. Of course, we know that. We know the Grimm's fairy tales, Andersen's fairy tales, and all the lady writers are just more forgotten. I think it's interesting, and it's interesting that in this period, 13th century, 21st century, they start to be known for what they deserved, really, because they had a beautiful writing, a beautiful imagination. It's not Disney. The word Beauty and the Beast doesn't come from Disney. It comes from Madame de Villeneuve. And who knows what she would have thought if she could have known the fame this fairy tale has now. So the main difference with the version we know from Madame Leprince de Beaumont mainly is that in the original text she's dreaming a lot. There is a big thing about illusion, she's dreaming of the reality, and she lives in illusions. Also in the original text, and there is a difference here between the English translation, I've seen that everywhere, and the French one. In the English one, the Beast asks all the time to La Belle, would you marry me? Would you marry me? Do you want to marry me? In the French version, he says, can I share your bed? It's what he says. It's just different, so I just think, oh, it's interesting in French you say that, and in English, it wasn't really suitable to say that, you would say, "Do you marry me?" Now, she didn't write that, but it's interesting to know. So I will have many videos about La Belle et la Bête which are coming. I'm still working on them right now. I've started several beasts, several bêtes, several belle, the castle too, so many pieces inspired by this fairy tale which I almost never explored. I did few things, but very few things. Most things that could be hung on the wall, but not real characters, so I'm really excited about that. So if you liked what you saw, you can give a thumbs up, you can subscribe if you don't want to miss all these next videos. You can go to read Madame de Villeneuve original story if you have never done that before. I think it's just interesting to go back to the roots, to the original, and just see the difference with all these adaptations we had on our screen, on the books, everywhere, which were very, very often very far from the original text. So thank you very much, and I will see you very soon.